Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm the GM Philosopher, and today we are talking about what makes a good D&D adventure. When I think about this, what I always think about is like starting a D&D game. It might be a one-shot, but though I don't play one-shots very much anymore, usually I'm plotting out a longer-term campaign. Generally speaking, I'm planning for the campaign to go to epic levels, so to level 20. That's almost always the goal I start with, and most of my campaigns do end up getting there. So with that being said, what makes a good D&D adventure in a long-term span of time, in the span of like 20 levels for a party? So the very first thing is sort of the context and the premise. Okay, so for example, with my latest game, the basic premise was I wanted the group to start as like immigrants who are basically refugees from a war-torn continent. And that was like the basic premise I started with. And then I built story and lore around it. I was like, well, what is the war? Who started it? What's it about? And all these things. And I'm not going to go too deep into like all the backstory, but basically this new monotheistic religion headed by this great ancient dragon who has like basically rallied the dragonborn race to his cause all on this one continent called Dracoria, and he's like subjugated the other races and made them like lesser beings in their caste system, and he's like built these armies, and he's kind of bent on world domination and making sure that all sentient creatures are either worshiping him or they're put to the fire, basically. So they've waged this war, and then this continent where the players started their game, like where they were before the game started, they grew up there and stuff, that continent has been captured and wiped out, and they actually are refugees now leaving the continent. And so that was like the beginning of the basics for the campaign. And having a good premise to build your campaign on is, I think, one of the first things to look at. Now, one thing you can use to kind of build a premise and a plot is something like my Ultimate Plot Randomizer. I wrote this ebook. It has 4 D100 tables that you can kind of determine the beginning, the conflict, and the conclusion of plot arcs. You can like random roll them with D100s, and you can have a wild monkey table to like throw an extra thing into your plot that maybe no one would have seen coming, and you can like really creatively bend it to help you. So if you want to grab that, I sometimes use that for like smaller level plot hooks in like a more isolated adventures that happen within my campaigns. I use it literally every time I play, and you can get it for free by joining my email list. There's a link in the description. If you sign up for my email list, the very first email you will get within like literally seconds is the email that delivers the download link for this ebook, so you can get it for free. So kind of fun. You might want to check it out. But with that being said, figuring out the larger plot hook is important. And that's like the big narrative that drives the whole story. And then, of course, you have smaller plot arcs that happen within the expanse of that story. The context is important to those plot arcs, but they may or may not be directly related. But all of that is really, really crucial. Another thing that's super crucial is having some kind of thing the group is struggling against. So, for example, in my story, one of the big like enemies or situations or disasters the group was striving against in the first quarter of the campaign, kind of like up to level 5, was actually the struggle of being a refugee. So there were bad guys. There were like corrupt officers. There were people who wanted to exploit them. There were people who wanted to take advantage of them. There were even people who wanted to kill them, etc. However, really all of that was driven by this plight to overcome the danger and the problems associated with being refugees in a new country and land that wasn't really friendly toward them. And so that was kind of like my big bad evil person in the first quarter of the campaign. It was just, we have no money. We can't hardly find work because we are immigrant class. The reason we are immigrant class is because we can't afford to become citizen class, and that keeps us from being able to like do any above the board jobs pretty much. We're facing a lot of stigma. There is even racism, right? So there's all these things the group was having to fight against, and that was really the main antagonist. Now, in the second quarter of the campaign, the group just turned level 5. So we're kind of entering the second quarter. And in the second quarter, the actual big bad evil person it has become really the leader of this monotheistic religion who destroyed their homeland. And this is going to take a more predominant front seat, but it has taken a quarter of the campaign just to get these characters to a point where they've developed enough to even get that attention of that campaign. Like, they were not on the radar until they took out this Dragonborn camp. And yes, the Dragonborn camp. So, and I know that I'm kind of jumping around topics here, but basically they fled from that land where they were refugees, and they went to this little island, and they were thinking about just setting up on this island, living there because it was much more friendly toward refugees. But it turned out there was this Dragonborn camp there. They were emissaries from Dracoria, place that was responsible for wiping out their homeland. And so they ended up finding out that these Dragonborn were doing sketchy things on the island. They wanted to industrialize it, which would have destroyed its natural resources. And they also found out that they were kidnapping people. So the group decided to help the islanders get rid of the Dragonborn, and they did it. But when they did that, they got on the radar of the very people who had been responsible for wiping out their homeland. They got the attention of basically the high commander of the Dracorian army and Scalethar himself, who is like talking to this commander. And Scalethar's rage, who is the ancient red dragon responsible for this religion, his wrath is kindled against these people, and he's going to send his armies after them. So there's a group coming after them. So he's going to become like that commander, and then the dragon, the god himself, they're going to become primary big bad evil guys and antagonists to the group in the campaign. But the point of all this is to say, you want to have something that they're striving against. There's a danger. It could be a situation. It could be a villain. It could be multiple villains. It could be an organization. It could be a movement or a philosophy or an ideology. But at the end of the day, there has to be something that the party becomes aware of that is either a danger to their existence or a threat to their existence, or that poses some kind of existential threat that they begin to realize they're going to have to deal with. And most likely it's because this threat starts to kind of creep in on them. It doesn't usually happen all at once. Generally, it just creeps in and creeps in. And as the GM, I like to put little things in there to make it so that this happens more and more over time. They keep running into plot hooks that have to do with it, and these things lead them further and further down the path of concluding, if we don't actually rise up and put a stop to this, it's going to keep coming back at us. And that's sort of what I put in there as the instigator for getting them to care about it to a point. Like, there's more to it, but that's one of the things I use. So a good villain or situation that they're striving against is crucial. You could call this the conflict, right? Now, another element that is crucial for a good adventure and a good game, I would say, would be the situations the players are in every day. And this includes NPCs. This includes like pets. This includes finding treasure, finding cool, fun plot arcs, finding cool and interesting enemies that they love and hate in the short term. So there is a big story, but that big story is made up every day of things that the players are doing. Not every day like in your life, but every day in the game, the characters are doing something. One day they may be crawling a dungeon. One day they may be trying to tame a horse. One day they may be trying to find a Pegasus to ride. One day they may be trying to go on a date with the local barmaid. One day they may be trying to save an orphan from a life on the street, right? So there's all these things that your players are going to do that will maybe probably to a point matter in the end, but they matter a lot today. And so basically that's the day-to-day nitty-gritty of the game, and running those things well is actually even more important than the process of the big context. A lot of times the big context can be relatively forgiving if the nitty-gritty and the day-to-day is ran well. So that is like the third thing that I would say is really important to a good campaign is just the knowledge that you're running the day-to-day in such a manner that it really engages the players and helps with immersion and helps them feel connected to the story, right? And then this is sort of a strange kind of afterthought, but not an afterthought, but something that is actually not related to role play itself, but that is keeping good notes. In a long-term campaign, a good adventure, you can lose energy by losing information. Like, I one time, not too long ago, had this situation where my note taker, like I have an official note taker at my table who their job is that they keep very good notes for all the sessions. But he was gone one session, and so I took over the task in the interim. And part of the reason that I don't actually have that task permanently as the GM is because I don't want to have to keep stopping and starting the game to dictate or record notes on my laptop. So I hand that out to another player who's super gracious and willing to do it. However, I did it this one day and I did not keep super meticulous notes. And this is always the problem I run into when I keep notes, is that I end up actually skipping too many things because I'm busy role playing and I'm not taking notes. So I ended up not keeping great notes. And then the next session, we realized that one of the characters had a conversation with an NPC, but we had such a hard time remembering who this NPC was, what their name was. And part of the reason for it is because it was just one thing out of many that happened. And at the time, it didn't seem super relevant, but it became relevant in the next session. And since we play every other week, there were like 2 weeks to forget about it. So it is so important to keep track of what's going on because you can lose energy. It's so handy to be able to look back 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago and be like, hey, where were we and who exactly was our contact for that thing? And then go find it. It makes it feel a lot more real to the story and true to the story than just being like, oh, I'll just make it up again. That feels a little fake to me, right? That feels kind of fake and feels bad. So I think that keeping really great notes is essential to having a good adventure too. There's obviously like hundreds of things I could list, but these are probably the 4 things that I would say are probably generally underserved and generally not given the attention that they deserve to run awesome adventures. And with that being said, I would love to hear what you think. Drop me a note, comment in the comments. Let me know if you have anything to add to this list. Probably all kinds of awesome stuff, and I'd love to hear it. And at the same time, I want to thank you so much for coming by my channel. Please give me a thumbs up and a subscribe if you like the content. I'm here almost every day talking about my favorite game in the world, D&D, how to make it better for everyone. So get out there and play some D&D this week and weekend. I'll see you on the next one.